Hey, good afternoon again to the new people who have joined. Welcome to our February webinar. Our topic for this month is digging deeper into layout paragraphs. And our speaker for today is Justin Toupin of Aten Design Group. So before we get started, I'd like to kind of go over housekeeping. So I kind of want to talk about what we do. Most of you all are familiar with Drupal for Gov. We are a community and we love all things open source. Our main focus is Drupal, but we do welcome other topics outside of Drupal. In addition to this monthly webinar that we hold, we also have we haven't had it in a few years, our Drupal GovCon. We're hoping we can have something planned with regard to a conference this year, but more information coming when we have that information. We also do the the global training days, the half-day training, and we should have some more information about that. We're in the planning stages of planning a half-day, and we also manage and plan the Gov Summit at DrupalCon North America. So if you're interested in any information regarding the conferences and webinars that we do, or you're interested in actually presenting, please contact us through either our email, Slack, and we're also, we can be found on Twitter. And I'd like to mention this again, we are looking for space for our Drupal GovCon. The past few, we didn't have one last year, but previous years we were online, we had an online conference. And so unfortunately, we weren't able to return to NIH campus. And so we're looking for additional space. So if you work within a government agency and you know of space that can handle a conference of the same size as Drupal GovCon, please reach out to us. Also, if you miss a webinar, we always upload our videos to YouTube, and you can always visit the Drupal for Gov webinars page and find links to those past webinars. And our webinar for next month will be Drupal and Backdrop CMS by Tim Erickson. And last but definitely not least, I'd like to introduce Justin. He is the CEO and founding partner at Aten Design Group. He started in Aten in 2000, and he also is a co-maintainer for separate Drupal projects, including Mercury Editor and also OpenAid. So now I'm going to hand it over to Justin. Thank you, Justin, for.
Great. Thanks, Nika. Really awesome to be here. Thanks, everybody, for attending. Really excited to be talking with all of you about something that I spend a lot of time working on and talking about. I'm going to stop my video and start screen share. Oh. Seriously, start screen share. There we go. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. Maybe somebody could just chat that yes, you can see my screen. That would be great. Awesome. Yes. Thank you. Okay, great. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about layout paragraphs. We're going to be digging a little deeper and building on some things that we've talked about, or that I've talked about specifically in the past with respect to layout paragraphs. So if you've seen any of this content before, I'm hoping to get a little bit more in depth with some capabilities around layout paragraphs. If you haven't, not a big deal. We're going to go back over most of the foundational stuff. Anyways, my name again is Justin. I work with Aten Design Group. Aten is a strategy, design, and development company based in Denver, Colorado. Although as of early last year, our team is fully remote. We have folks spread out all across the US. And in a number of countries all around the globe. We work primarily with organizations in the .edu, .org, and .gov domain spaces. We're a full service agency. We do a lot of work helping organizations implement powerful authoring experience tools for their editors, with a specific focus on marketing and editorial staff. And a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is derivative of exactly that. So let's dive in. Today, what we're specifically going to cover is, first and foremost, talk about what exactly is layout paragraphs. I want to talk a little bit about current status and adoption. Always enjoy just giving a quick update of kind of where layout paragraphs is on Drupal.org from a high level. I'll do a demo of layout paragraphs just recently installed with Drupal 9, very few other modules, more or less right out of the box what you get, and specifically contrasting it a little bit or just showing how it works with the paragraphs module in Drupal and how it extends the paragraphs module in Drupal. I want to talk a little bit today about some tools that are baked into layout paragraphs or leveraged by layout paragraphs for helping automate web governance. And really what we're talking about there is simply tools that make it easier to define what can be added by whom, where in a particular website. So again, kind of automating some of the process of determining what components or what paragraphs can be added where. I'm going to touch on layout paragraphs and decoupled. This is going to be, I want to say really high level. That might not quite be right. Maybe really low level is a better way to say this. I'm just going to talk a little bit about how layout paragraphs works with JSON API, which is the sort of de facto means of implementing decoupled and headless projects in Drupal. Layout paragraphs works seamlessly with JSON API, and I'll just show what I mean by that and specifically look at what the data structure is that comes out of JSON API. Finally, I'll do another demo of a customized example from a client project, from a recent client project, and show some of the more customized features of layout paragraphs. I'm also going to be showing a little bit of a product we've been working on, also available as a Drupal module called Mercury Editor. Mercury provides a series of customizations on top of layout paragraphs. That's going to be in that demo that I'm talking about with that client project. And then finally, should have time for any questions. Speaking of questions, I'm going to try to keep an eye on chat as we progress through this presentation. Most questions I'll try to save for the end, just depending on kind of what I see come through chat. So please feel free to post things there. Just really quickly, though, I don't think I'm going to get too much during the presentation into a comparison between layout paragraphs and layout builder. I'm happy to address that in Q&A, and hopefully some of that becomes evident just as we work through this presentation. If you're familiar at all with layout builder, how this is a little bit different, in some ways significantly different than layout builder. Okay, great. That's what we're going to cover. Really quickly, some prerequisites, some concepts that would be good to have an understanding with, not hard requirements by any means, but certainly experience using Drupal is a plus. Layout paragraphs is built on the paragraphs module, so experience with paragraphs will be really helpful. Having some experience configuring content types and fields, or at least being familiar with those concepts, will be useful. Same thing goes for working with users, roles, and permissions, although honestly, we're not going to get too far into that today. Familiarity with the JSON API and how that drives headless applications. We're only going to spend a couple minutes touching on headless and JSON APIs, so again, just useful if you kind of understand that concept already. And I think that's about it. So let's dive in. First, what is layout paragraphs? So layout paragraphs is really simply a Drupal module. It provides expressive drag and drop content authoring using structured content. And using structured content, specifically what I mean by that is in the context of fields and content entities in Drupal. It leverages familiar workflow and configuration, again, with fields, field widgets, and field formatters. So essentially, layout paragraph simply adds a field widget and field formatter to a field type that already exists in Drupal, to paragraph reference fields. Because of that, layout paragraphs generally speaking, does not require any migration to get it to work. It can be installed directly on top of paragraphs, and again, provides the formatters and widgets necessary to work, just installing it directly on paragraphs. We'll take again a look at what that, exactly what that looks like and what that means. And then as I've mentioned already, layout paragraphs works with JSON API out of the box. This is really simply because layout paragraphs is built on top of the field API in Drupal. So everything that's available to the field API is available to JSON API, or everything that's exposed through the field API rather, including layout paragraphs. And then finally, layout paragraphs provides a foundation or provides APIs for further improving the authoring experience. And we'll see a little bit of that when we get to the more customized example toward the end of the presentation. Layout paragraphs is available on Drupal.org at the module page, drupal.org/project/layout_paragraphs. There are two major branches. At this point, we're strongly recommending that everyone upgrade to the 2x branch. So if you're on 1x, we recommend upgrading to 2x. The functionality is similar. The underlying code level APIs have changed drastically. The architecture of the module has been completely rewritten, re-architected from the ground up in the 2x version. Everything we're talking about in terms of layout paragraphs providing that foundation for development or for extending the authoring experience, all of that's in that 2x module and 2x version. Upgrading from version 1 to 2 should be seamless. So there's a really easy upgrade path. The 2x branch also provides a series of automated tests. So there's close to full automated test coverage running automatically on Drupal.org, and of course, also that you can pull into your own projects. Adoption continues to grow. We're over 5,500 known cases where layout paragraphs is being used to power sites, just based on stats from Drupal.org. I gave a similar talk at Drupal for Gov a little over a year ago, and it's about doubled since the last time we talked. And certainly the vast majority of that growth has been the 2x branch, which just has a stable release as of earlier this year. Okay, that's some really high-level background information about layout paragraphs and what it is. I'm going to transition over to a demo and show exactly how it works and what it does. I'm going to do that using, again, a very simple Drupal 9 website. This is something that was just installed. I just installed this yesterday, actually, and pushed some default content into the site. I'm going to be demoing layout paragraphs using the idea of case studies as an example for the type of content that we wanted to power, that we wanted to make simpler to interact with, or for content editors to interact with. Obviously, no custom theming, no custom design work has been applied to the site. So again, the real purpose of this is to show how layout paragraphs would work in a brand new site, or kind of what you get out of the box. So just to start at a really basic level, installing Drupal, we get a couple different content types: basic page and article. If we wanted to use, so again, I'm going to kind of go through this in the context of case studies, what an agency might want to publish as far as a case study. So we'll take a look at a very simple case study example where we have an image that kind of shows the work that we've done, the client name, the project name, and some content down below. And right out of the box, Drupal provides tools for very simply presenting this kind of story content. Now, obviously, often we want to go a little deeper and tell a story that is more rich, more dynamic, includes more media, and that it simply is more flexible. And that's where the paragraphs module can be really powerful. If we take a look at the second content type, the basic page, in this case, one customization we have made to this, again, this simple site, is we've replaced the content field, the typical text content field, with a paragraph reference field, which lets us reference a series of small chunks of content called paragraphs that are provided by the paragraphs module. We scroll down the page, we have an image followed by text, another chunk of text, more text, a slideshow, again, with no custom theming, just these modules really turned on and the content copied and pasted in, followed by an image, some text, etc., the whole way down the page. If I take a quick look at the Edit tab, we'll see how this works by default using the Paragraphs module. Again, the Paragraphs module allows us to reference a series of different types of sub-content or smaller chunks of content where the types are kind of intermixed. So we have an image followed by text, more text, a slideshow. The slideshow itself has images within it. You can kind of get a sense for those. Followed by another image, some text, etc. And you kind of get the idea of how this works. This works really well, again, for breaking content into these smaller, distinct sections or chunks of content with smaller pieces of content, and still adheres to some of the really important underlying principles behind Drupal and any content management system of supporting structured content. Now, if we want to add a new item to this, we'd scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page, click add, in this case, add container. This is kind of an example of how we might have added structure pre-layout paragraphs before we use layout paragraphs. If any of you all have been involved in more complex paragraphs implementations, you've probably seen this kind of thing where you might choose create a container, add some text into a reference called left column, add some text into a reference called right column. And then when we save this, do some special theming to make those columns appear correctly. Now, if I wanted to drag this text column out of the right column here, drag this text and say, place it somewhere up here, there's really no way to do that with this particular architecture. We're locked into what's been created in the context of right column has to stay there. So I would have to delete this piece of text, go up above and re-add it. And it gets a little cumbersome. It's just not quite what that interface was designed for. Further, again, the layout itself has to be built or added by the site builder, front-end developer, a custom theme, etc. So those are some of the things that we wanted to try to simplify from a user experience perspective using layout paragraphs. So I'm going to take a look at how that works and what happens when you turn on layout paragraphs just right out of the box. So to do that, we'll go over to structure. All I've done here is installed the layout paragraphs module. So that's the only kind of pre-work that was done here. If I go over to content types, manage form display on the basic page content type, scroll down to this content. Again, this is a custom field called content, which is just a paragraphs reference field. And we're going to change the widget from paragraphs stable to layout paragraphs. Hit save, and that's it. We'll go back to admin content, click back into our basic page, click on the edit tab for basic page, and we can see that the interface for working with these distinct paragraphs has completely changed. We now have a representation of more or less what this would look like in the front end. This is rendering with the back end theme, so there are some differences there, and I'm happy to talk through that if that comes up in the Q&A section of this talk. This is rendering those paragraphs more or less how they would look on the front end. And then we have controls for each distinct paragraph, or we often just refer to these as components, content components. We have controls for editing, duplicating, removing, and then adding an additional component. So if I click this add button, I get a list of everything that's available. If I want to add some additional text, I can do so. And it will add that new bit of text right where I've clicked the plus button, right in the context here, right in the viewport. We can kind of see our changes take effect immediately. If I want to move that, I can bounce that down using these arrow keys. I can also drag this anywhere I want to, so I can quickly move down to the bottom, drop it there, wherever I want it to go. Now, layout paragraphs, as the name implies, was designed from the beginning to support layout. And with that in mind, if I wanted to do something like add a 2-column layout and maybe put this text to the right of this image, click the plus button, choose section, 2-column section, hit save. The 2-column, my new 2-column container has been dropped into the page. I'll grab this image and just drag it into that left section, grab the text, drag it into the right section. We can do the same thing down below. We'll add another section, another 2-column. Same concept here. We'll drag this image to the right, this text to the left. And again, hopefully that's giving everybody a really clear sense for how layout paragraphs quickly provides these really easy to use drag and drop tools for moving content around, authoring content, and working with layout. It's worth pointing out that the layout piece of layout paragraphs is using the layout API, which is in core, and is also is the same underlying technology or the underlying framework that is used by Layout Builder and other layout systems in Drupal. So any layout that you have exposed using the layout API in your website can be made available to layout paragraphs as an option here. And I'll show how that works here in just a second. Also, unlike the way some of those other systems work and a little differently than how Layout Builder works, we can change the column structure pretty easily in layout paragraphs. So if I change this to a 3-column, add some text in the center. And if I decided later that actually I don't need this to be 3 columns, 2 columns was good, I can go back, change it to 2 columns. It'll ask me what I want to do with the orphaned item. That is the item that would be, that item on the 3rd column is no longer going to exist. I'm going to choose to put that in the 2nd column and hit save, and it just moves that for me. And I'll throw the center text down below here. So again, just a quick example of how easy it is to move components around using layout paragraphs. A couple questions coming through. Plans to show layout templates, the blue line that appears without the need to hover your mouse. There are no plans for that currently. That is something that could be pretty easily added to someone's specific implementation just with some CSS. In terms of mobile and responsive, that is still completely up to the extent to which layout paragraphs is responsive is completely up to the front-end developer. So there's nothing that works against being responsive. In the case of our own website, working with case studies on our own website, we even have like a column stacking order choice when working with layout paragraphs that determines at smaller break points which column appears at the top versus the bottom. I'm happy to demo that in a little bit more detail. All of that, breakpoints and all of the responsive nature of those sections would just be up to the front-end developer to build into the layouts here. And something else I should also mention, and this is not about layout paragraphs specifically, but is about the layout API, which is part of the foundation for layout paragraphs. In the layout API, layouts are simply a combination of a template. So that is the Twig template that provides the HTML structure, plus CSS, which of course, between those two pieces, CSS and the HTML template is where you would derive that responsiveness or determine how that works or how that functions at different breakpoints. And then optionally, a JavaScript, behaviors in JavaScript, as well as backend functionality. So it's those, at a minimum, it's a template plus CSS. It can also include JavaScript and a PHP plugin. Okay, that's a quick look at how layout paragraphs works right out of the box. Let's take another look at some of actually, I'll just save this really quick and we'll take a look at the front end. And actually, I think when we look at the front end, it's not going to look right. So when we scroll down here, yeah, so we're getting repeating elements. And the reason for that is, in addition to changing the form display, as we did before, to layout paragraphs, the other thing that we also have to configure is the display itself. And we have to say that we want this content to not be displayed in the default way as a rendered entity, but instead be displayed using layout paragraphs. Hit save, go back to that piece of content, And now that's showing correctly without repeating those elements as we scroll down through here. Okay, great. Let's take a look at some of the options that are available out of the box. If I go back to the manage form display, scroll down to the layout paragraphs field, we'll take a look at a few of these. In the settings, we can say what view mode for paragraphs we want to use. So sometimes it makes sense to have a separate preview view mode that you might use in the back end. Some folks want labels, for example, on their different paragraph types, or perhaps if you're showing a more complex web form, it would make sense that on the front end, you would render the web form, and in the back end, you would simply say, this is a preview of the web form, something like that. That's easy to control by adding custom view modes for paragraphs, then choosing which view mode you want to use to render them in layout paragraphs. Maximum nesting depth. In layout paragraphs, it is possible and simple to nest sections. So if we wanted to allow nested sections, we can do that up to 10 levels. I have never used that many. In fact, we rarely go above 1 or 2. But if you choose, for example, maximum nesting depth of 2, go back to our piece of content, hit edit, and we'll scroll down to one of these sections. And, well, I don't have to move it out of there. I'm going to add, now I can now add a section within this section. Because I said 2, I can add another section within this section. Things are going to get kind of wild. And then now I can no longer add one because I've just said up to 2. And so it will automatically, the JavaScript updates as well, only allow one to add as many sections as you have said to allow. Sometimes it makes sense in developing sections. I mean, one, it's possible that you might choose to create a section that does something like provide an image gallery, where that's actually being provided by a section rather than provided by a distinct paragraph itself. And you might want to be able to nest that within other sections. Sometimes folks want to work with simpler layouts where there might not even be, for example, a header and footer. Everything might just be a number of columns. And in those cases, sometimes it makes more sense to nest things as well. But that nesting can be pretty powerful. We'll add some inner text here and hit save. And again, that's now 2 levels deep. Let's go back to manage display and see some of these other options. One other one worth calling out is the ability to require paragraphs to be added inside of a section. So if we update that, it won't disrupt the structure of the page as it's already been created. But if I reload, and I'll just save changes and then edit again. Now that I've selected that option, I have to start with a section. I cannot add a piece of content outside of the context of a section. And then once I've added a section within a particular section, we can add whatever components or paragraph types are available in the system. Okay, there's just one more option, one more kind of default layout paragraphs option that I want to take a look at before we keep going through the presentation deck here. And that is, if I go back up to manage display, another option that we have with layout paragraphs is this layout paragraphs builder experimental field formatter. If I choose that as the way to render the front end of the layout paragraphs field, and I can go up to the view tab, we'll see this edit content option, click edit, and we're now editing content directly on the view tab, which can be really powerful for enabling users to edit text again through the front end without that separation of moving between a view and edit tab. And I can show a little bit more about how this works and some of the customizations that are available with this when we get into the kind of customized portion of the demo that I was talking about a little earlier. Another question I'm seeing coming through, and again, really relevant, thanks for that, really relevant to what we're talking about right now, is just how is this different from Gutenberg? So layout paragraphs is built entirely on paragraphs, and it means that all of the components that we see down the page are distinct paragraphs or entities attached to the parent, which is the page. These entities in turn tie into the entire Drupal entity system. So we can manage permissions on these entities. We can manage view modes on the entities. All of the typical theme hooks are available for these entities, patching into front-end components with all of the different really interesting things happening in front-end development with component-driven front-end development is really simple and easily possible. Again, using paragraphs as kind of those smaller chunks. With Gutenberg, my understanding is that it is much more like an open text field with really complex and powerful blocks within that text field, so that the user sees, you know, again, these kind of rendered block structures, but under the hood that's stored as text content. And it's really something different than Drupal entities. It introduces a whole different system and a whole different way of storing content. It's a brief bit about how this differs from Gutenberg. And then I'll also get into content moderation here in a minute, which is another question that I'm seeing come through. Okay, let's go back over here to this deck. So that's just, again, a really quick look at how layout paragraphs works right out of the box. I want to talk just for a minute about governance and permissions. That's going to keep this really high level. There are a few really simple things to look at with respect to governance and permissions right out of the box. The first is the paragraphs permissions submodule of the paragraphs module, which provides permissions on different paragraph types, which allows one to very easily say, role X is allowed to create paragraph Y or Z, and to manage those things independently. That integrates seamlessly with layout paragraphs. So if you have said a particular role can only add particular types of paragraphs, those are the only types of paragraphs someone would have access to when working with layout paragraphs. Second, there is a permissions submodule within layout paragraphs. And the permissions submodule within layout paragraphs provides access to things like drag and drop, duplicate, and behavior settings. I'll show behavior settings here in a minute as well. The layout paragraphs permission submodule is fairly simple, and it only provides permissions for these three things. So you could choose a role that, say, was not able to use any of the drag and drop tools and could just edit content in place. More importantly, the layout paragraphs permissions submodule really works as a template for showing how to create more complex permissions around layout paragraphs. So if you needed to build any more complex business logic, you could do that as a custom module, and use that layout paragraphs permissions submodule as a starting point for that. And then finally, there's a module that's just has a dev release right now. It's the layout paragraphs restrictions module, which we're still actively developing against. And this provides hooks for defining at a very granular level what groups of paragraphs can be added into which context. So that might include, you know, what paragraphs can be added into what type of region. Often there are some paragraphs that make sense to be added into a single full screen or a single column wide section, and should never be added in a left-hand column or restricted to a right-hand column or something like that. And this module provides a hook for controlling that. That's just a brief bit about governance and permissions. Let's talk some about decoupled and headless. So I'm not going to get into examples of headless projects here. Really, I just want to talk briefly about the JSON API integration with layout paragraphs. That's really overstating it. The simple reality is layout paragraphs works with JSON API right out of the box. Because layout paragraphs is built on entity reference fields, again, the data is published via JSON API once you have JSON API enabled. Really quick look at what that actually means. This is the JSON API payload. This is the only time we'll look at code, I promise, unless anyone asks to look at more during Q&A. This is a quick look at the JSON API payload. So that the data that is spit out by JSON API, which is the de facto way that we use Drupal as the content server for headless and decoupled applications. And all of the layout paragraphs data is available in this payload. And it's in here in a really simple, easy to leverage structure right here where I'm pointing with my mouse. We can see this layout paragraphs key with the layout, the code of the layout. So you could again patch into this with whatever front end system you're using and render the layout based on the layout ID. And then the parent ID and the region ID says where this item belongs in the wider structure. For most sections, that will be empty, which simply means they're at the highest level, they're at the root level. Just one more look at this. Just the difference really quickly between a section component, what's output for a section. Again, with the section, we have a reference to the layout ID. The parent and region typically is null. On the right-hand side, we have a component, or rather a content component versus section component with a reference to the parent and region. And using that information, it's really simple to rebuild this into a front end in a headless or decoupled architecture. I'm gonna just do one more demo here, and we'll take a look at this as it's working in a client project that is still under active development. This is something that we expect to go live here in just the next few weeks, and then should have plenty of time still to get through some of the questions that are still coming through. So I'm going to transition over. This is in this tab, I'm not logged in as an admin user. This is just the anonymous view of the homepage of this website, Neutrino Day. It's a website all about a science festival that's held by the Sanford Underground Research Laboratory, the largest research laboratory in North America. And this is a conference that they put on every year. And this website, of course, is all about that conference. In this tab, I'm not logged in. I'm going to toggle over to this other tab. The only difference is that in the second tab, I'm logged in as an admin user. This is using the Gin admin theme, which provides a really awesome look and feel for the administrative portion of Drupal. And that's what's providing this toolbar down the left, as well as across the top. I'm going to click on edit on this piece of content. A lot of these customizations are being provided by Mercury Editor, which again is available as a Drupal module. Mercury is a product we've been working on that is built on top of layout paragraphs and just really extends, again, the authoring experience using layout paragraphs. It's using that front end builder we were talking about. If I click into any of these sections, you can kind of get a sense for what all of the options are and how flexible this can become. I talked earlier just briefly about behavior settings. There's yet another module called Style Options that provides behavior settings for adding styles to layouts and paragraphs. So in this case, a custom style that we've defined specifically for this website is this geometric background. I can change the background, which simply changes out the class, which again means something only in the context of the site. I can change the width of the container. It's going to look weird, but I'll do it anyways. I hit save. We see that narrow width is applied and the geometric shape is changed. If I hit the plus button, we'll see a view of all of the different component types that have been added for this particular website. So again, really building on what we were seeing before. All of these different paragraph types have been added and customized specifically to the needs of this project. One difference, and I'm happy to get into this in more detail, but one big difference between this and Layout Builder is that these are all paragraph types, and Layout Paragraphs is specifically designed only to work with paragraph type. So each of these is a different paragraph type for the site. We've added in some additional refinements, so you can toggle in cases where one might not even need the edit form. You can skip the edit form. For example, if you're dropping in a horizontal rule, click on horizontal rule, it just drops it right in place. Whereas if we click on text, we get this edit form that loads. to add in our new text item. We get a sense here for how image galleries can work. If I scroll down this image gallery, in this case, the image gallery is simply a list of nested paragraphs. If I click into edit, we have a list of paragraphs where each one has the media item, which is the image. If I remove this, you can see that this integrates with media library, so I can attach a media item, choose that from the library. Let's see if I can find the same one or something comparable. As well as a caption, hit save, that's updated immediately. We have the news, below news, we have a view. This is a case where having a separate preview view mode for the paragraph would probably make sense, where the back end is not able to render the preview for this view. We could just easily create a separate view mode for the paragraph and just make that say preview or news items would be listed here or something like that. This is just showing a list of news items. It's showing the news view and embedding the news view via a paragraph reference field. We have calls to action for images. And moving down the page. Mercury editor provides this edit tray functionality, and it essentially loads the edit form in an iframe in a tray style dialog off to the right. It's not using the off canvas dialog API in Drupal. This is using a custom dialog element. And it also integrates really simply with content moderation. So we're seeing the edit form here. We could change this to draft, archived, etc. And it really works. It doesn't change at all the way that system works. It's just working with the content moderation system that is already there. So I'll close out of this. Oh, actually, one more thing I'll show just really quickly. Just again, to show some of the customization, some of the types of customizations that are available with layout paragraphs. Something that we have built specifically for this and a few other projects that we're working on is the save as template. So I mentioned before that layout paragraphs provides an API for building, for really building rich authoring experiences. It's not difficult, for example, to add to the list of these controls where it says section, where my mouse is pointing here. And in this case, we've created a custom module with this save link, this kind of the arrow pointing down. If I hit the save link, I have the option to save this item as a template. Give this a label, I'll call this homepage masthead, hit save. It has now saved this entire section as a template. If I move further down the page, hit the plus button, we now have this new area of components with templates and the homepage masthead. And if I drop the homepage masthead in, it drops in that template that I just created. Layout paragraphs does integrate with the paragraphs library, so you can reuse paragraphs across an entire site. That's not what this is doing, though. This is actually using this as a template. So if I were to go in here and change my heading or change any other piece of this, it's not changing that original. It really is just a copy. So I can change this, hit save. It'll update the heading once that refreshes without affecting the top piece. It's worth saying this is running locally and every bit of caching is turned off, so also running a little bit slower than what we would typically see. That's a quick look at a really customized version of this. I think that is about everything I have. Again, some of those customizations are built using this tool called Mercury. You can check that out at our website, aten.io/Mercury. It is also available on Drupal.org, just at drupal.org/project/Mercury. And I think that's about everything I had. I am happy to answer any questions. and maybe starting with some of the questions that we've had around layout builder versus layout paragraphs. I'm just going to share my camera here again. Great. Great. So yeah, great question about layout builder versus layout paragraphs. So layout builder provides a drag and drop interface for adding anything in Drupal that is a block into a layout. Layout builder also allows admin users or users with the correct permissions to create templates for how a particular entity display should render. So you can set up the layout, for example, for a particular node type page and say, for all of my article pages, I want this field to show up first, I want this other field to show up second, etc. And then you can overwrite that for specific cases as well. Layout Builder is a really powerful module. It has become the way that we structure blocks, that we position blocks, the leading way that we position blocks in Drupal 8 and beyond. So Drupal 9 now and will be 10. For us, the main difference between Layout Builder and layout paragraphs is we see Layout Builder as a site building tool. It really, in that sense, kind of replaces what we used to do with panels or panelizer in Drupal 7, and is a tool for organizing blocks across a site or into specific regions. Layout paragraphs we think of as a content tool. Layout paragraphs is completely concerned with the content that is associated with a particular content type or node. And that's one of the main differences. Layout paragraphs is built around paragraphs entirely. It's really limited to paragraphs by design, whereas Layout Builder is meant to work with and built for blocks used across an entire website. Hopefully that answer makes sense.
Do you see that question? Is there a way to incorporate Mercury Editor's content moderation functionality without using Mercury Editor?
I actually didn't see that as a way to incorporate it. Gotcha. Great question. So yes and no. I mean, what Mercury Editor is designed to do is provide a lot of those customizations right out of the box as a series of Drupal modules. So it has some dependencies that bring in some of that functionality, and then a lot of submodules are included in that module. And it's fairly heavy-handed. And I would say, like, versus a lot of other projects that we publish to Drupal or that we see as contributor modules, Mercury is pretty opinionated in how it does things. It provides this tray on the right-hand side. It turns on editing on the left-hand side, etc. Now, you could certainly achieve most of that functionality, or really all of that functionality, yes, without having to use Mercury, either using the code that's available in Mercury as a guide on how to do that in a way that's custom to your own site, or just by implementing different pieces of that kind of Mercury ecosystem as your own recipe. And certainly one way to do that would be to download the Mercury module and just play with that and see how that might work.
Okay, I'm going to piggyback on another question that's related. I understand Mercury is dependent upon CK Editor 5. How much of the functionality you demonstrated do you lose without Mercury?
That's a great question. So Mercury is not actually dependent on CK Editor 5, and there's no tight coupling there. So the pieces on this page, for example, that are provided by Mercury, again, would be this edit tray on the right. Otherwise, this is just a node edit form, just this coming right out of Drupal, just using its own form mode, its own form display mode. On the left-hand side, what's giving the UI for editing these different components with these outlines and the edit buttons, etc., really has nothing to do with CK Editor. That's just coming from layout paragraphs. So those are the controls that are coming directly from layout paragraphs. The piece that would be from CK Editor 5 is if we click into text. The text editor being used here is CK Editor 5, and that's simply because CK Editor 5 is the default text editor now for the latest versions of Drupal. But other than that, there's no there is no hard dependency there. And in fact, with CK Editor 4, we had built an integration where you could easily edit this text without even clicking into edit. So you could simply click and start editing. And we're working on finishing that up for CK Editor 5. But there's no dependency there on either of those WYSIWYG modules.
Okay, thank you. Another question, what form display field did you add layout paragraphs to on the basic page? I think this was earlier in your presentation.
Yeah, I can just go back and take a look at how that's working. So if we go to basic page, actually, let me just click through starting from the very beginning. So if we click on structure, content types, go to basic page, and I'll take a look first at the manage fields screen. There's a body field, which is text, which we're actually hiding. We're not using that anywhere. That's what's provided by default by Drupal. We added this content field called field_content. It is an entity reference revisions field, which really just means paragraph field. If I go over to manage form display, scroll down to my content field, since layout paragraphs, the module is turned on, for a paragraph reference field, layout paragraphs will be an option for the widget. I chose layout paragraphs. That gives me some configuration options on the right, but that's really all you have to do on the form side. And then again, on the display side, you just want to make sure that you are also using layout paragraphs so that on the front end, the view tab for that piece of content, the content is rendered using layout. Otherwise, it'll be rendered using the default way and it just won't quite render right.
Okay, and I think you had another question for the CK editor. So this should work for the most part on Drupal 9.5 with CK Editor 4?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, again, there's no issue whether you're using CK Editor 4 or 5. I mean, honestly, I haven't tried it, but if you're using like Tiny MCE or any of the other, that system in Drupal is completely pluggable for text editors. And regardless of what text editor you use, layout paragraphs should work. And again, what you'll get, go back into one of these and click edit. You know, when you have a text field on a paragraph type, the text editor here will be using whatever text editor you have configured with your site. So in your case, in the case of that Drupal 9 website running CK Editor 4, this will look slightly differently because it will be using CK Editor 4 instead of CK Editor 5. Otherwise, really, there should be no difference.
And Mike Hessling is asking, sounds like if you're already using paragraphs, dropping in layout paragraphs is trivial.
That's absolutely true. Certainly, I would test, and there will almost undoubtedly be some front-end development that you want to do in any significant production site, and some adjustments that you want to make. But to actually start working with layout paragraphs to get these controls, it's just a matter of turning the module on. If you really just wanted even just the drag and drop controls for paragraphs, so you don't even need the layout, you just want to be able to move these items around in a single list with the drag and drop controls, turning on layout paragraphs will provide that capability right out of the box. And in that case, you really, I mean, I of course would always recommend testing and making sure everything looks exactly as you want it. But there are plenty of sites that we've developed where we use layout paragraphs for no other reason than to offer drag and drop tools for moving these things around.
Okay. And French 8 is asking, how does that affect custom paragraph templates? I'm assuming this is in relation to layout paragraphs. Correct me if I'm wrong, French 8.
So yeah, I can, for custom, all of these paragraphs, everything we're looking at running down this list, I mean, all of these are paragraphs. Every single one of these items is a paragraph. And every single one of these items is using a custom paragraph template. We use components pretty heavily in front-end development. So each of these paragraph templates is basically just including a front-end component in the theme, and so it's passing the data to that component template, which really is just confirming what you're asking. Yes, layout paragraphs works with and supports custom templates. One thing that does get a little tricky is, in this case, these paragraphs are being rendered with the front-end theme for paragraphs. If you were using layout paragraphs in a way where it's on the edit tab, when you click over to the edit tab, these paragraphs are now being rendered with the back-end theme. We've done a lot of work to kind of make layout paragraphs work in the front end, and a lot of that is in Mercury, although some of that is also in the layout paragraphs front-end builder field formatter. But that is one thing that does get a little bit tricky. Otherwise, there's no issue with using custom paragraph templates with layout paragraphs. I mean, that's literally specifically what it was designed to do, is make it easy to work with paragraphs that were heavily customized.
Okay, the next question is, do you have plans to release a stable version of Mercury editor to Contrib?
I would say very loose plans and no timetable. We use Mercury editor extensively for clients and for client projects, and development of Mercury editor will continue to follow development as an agency. It's a client services agency. Development on that module will follow our work for our clients. And our goal is to make that as widely applicable as possible, and get to a place where we can manage releases in a way that's stable directly from Drupal.org. So yes, that is the direction that we're headed. No specific timetable in mind for that, though.
Okay, the next question is there a plan to integrate with Paragraph Browser?
No, there is no plan for integrating with Paragraph Browser. And to be honest, I'm not even that familiar with what Paragraph Browser provides. I will say that in the paragraph selection for layout paragraphs, so when we click on, let's go down here and click on, if I can find it, yeah, here we go. This view for adding new paragraphs is completely themable. So there are multiple hooks. There are a few different ways, I should say, like many things in Drupal, for customizing this view. My understanding, and I could be wrong, but my understanding is that Paragraph Browser does something similar to customizing this kind of view. And yeah, no, there's no plans for integrating the two currently. I should just say the hooks are in place, like many other things in Drupal, for bringing those together, should you choose.
Okay. And will any of the Mercury editor features be ported to layout paragraphs as submodules?
No, there's no plans to port those to layout paragraphs. Again, they are available on Drupal.org, and people are certainly welcome to fork anything that's in Mercury editor, grab any of those modules and use them as custom modules. If folks wanted to use some of the submodules from Mercury and fork them into supported standalone Drupal modules, I mean, there's nothing stopping them. It is open source code. My goal for layout paragraphs would be to keep that as kind of broad purpose, generally applicable as is absolutely possible, and be as non-specific, non-opinionated in the way that's implemented as is possible, as is realistic or feasible. With Mercury, we're really taking more liberty and being a little more heavy-handed and being a little bit more opinionated in how that works. So that's kind of the philosophy behind those two. Hopefully that makes sense.
Next question, is there a way to use paragraph browsers in conjunction with layout paragraphs to give the user a nice paragraph choice screen?
Yeah, no, there currently is not. Again, I think that's similar to that previous question. The hooks exist, so one could do so. And I'm not sure how the other module works, but you can certainly customize the paragraph selection screen in layout paragraphs. And I think that's the way, that would be the best way to do that, to go about doing something like that.
And the last question so far, what's your opinion, read Zen theme versus Claro theme?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not sure I have used the Zen theme. I'm not sure I've used Zen theme, so I'm not sure I have an opinion on it. I will say the work that has happened in Claro has been really awesome. It's great to see just such a solid, easy to use, well-organized admin theme that's now shipping with Drupal as of Drupal 9. And then we also heavily use the Gin theme in Drupal as well, the Gin admin theme as well. And we've used plenty of others, but I'm not sure I'm familiar with the Zen theme enough to really comment. One other thing I will go back to for a second. I think someone asked about layout builder and layout paragraphs, and if there's a place ever for having both in the same website. And the simple answer to that is yes, there is. That's something that we do quite a bit of. We will often use layout builder for configuring the template or the structure of the page. So determining what shows up across the top, across the sidebar region, if there is one, where the title field is rendered, et cetera, in a consistent way across all the content of a content type or that kind of thing for building templates. Again, much like we did with Panelizer or Panels or whatever in past versions of Drupal. Then we'll use layout paragraphs for the content area within that kind of layout builder framework. So there's no real conflict. There's no conflict between the two. They work fine. We often use them together. In our thinking and in our implementations, they have very different roles.
And you have another question. Have you heard any success stories from many people who tried to use the Mercury editor on their own? And then he added, while also needing to do their own customizations to do it, i.e. theming, site building.
No, I really don't. And that really that has not been a focus for us. So I'm not sure I would be aware. I do know of plenty of developers who are using layout paragraphs in lots of different ways to really heavily customize the front end editing experience, similar to what we're trying to accomplish with Mercury. But I think so far, most of the folks who are using Mercury are, again, Aten clients or folks who are within our circle. That the code has just recently been released on Drupal.org, so it would be awesome to see that continue to grow. Again, the focus there is really on serving the needs of our clients and on building like the authoring experience that we have a strong vision for, versus something like layout paragraphs, where we just want to see that as broadly applicable as possible.
Well, I think we have answered all of the questions. Thank you so much for sharing this layout paragraphs, and all of the content editing is so important, and providing the ability to give content editors the flexibility is awesome through this module. So thank you again, Justin. And I look forward to having you come back again.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you, Nika, and thanks everyone else for hanging out. Really love talking about this stuff, and would love to continue the conversation offline as folks are interested. So thanks again.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And I will upload this to YouTube as soon as possible, and see everybody next month. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.